What remains of a man when everything is taken from him? Not his money, not his title, not his name, not the people he loved. What is left when there is nothing left? One man answered that question, not in a lecture hall, not in a therapy session, in a concentration camp. His name was Viktor Frankl. In 1942, he was one of the most respected psychiatrists in Vienna. He had a wife he loved, a family, a practice, a manuscript he had spent years writing. Then they came for him. He was 37 years old. They loaded him into a train. They took his clothes, his name, his manuscript. They gave him a number. He arrived at Auschwitz. Over the next 3 years, he would lose everything. His wife died in Bergen-Belsen. His mother was killed in the gas chambers. His brother died in the mines. He stood in the cold, wearing someone else's shoes, eating bread that wasn't bread, watching men around him collapse, one by one. Some gave up the first week. Others lasted months. A few survived. Frankl watched all of them, and he noticed something that changed everything. Here's what the guards could never understand. They controlled the barracks. They controlled the food. They controlled the morning roll call in the snow. But there was one thing they could not touch. The space between what happened to him and how he responded. That space was his. That space saved his life. He wrote about it later. He called it the last human freedom. Everything can be taken from a man. But one thing, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Think about what that means. Not the freedom to leave, not the freedom to fight back, the freedom to decide what this means to you, the freedom to say, this will not define me, this will not destroy me, this will not be the end of my story. He sat in the darkest place in human history, and he chose not happiness, not comfort, not denial. He chose meaning, and meaning kept him alive. Most men never reach the bottom. They spend their entire lives circling it, afraid to fall, afraid to lose, afraid to find out who they really are. When stripped of everything, Frankl had no choice. But you are standing at the edge right now, and the only question that matters is what you choose to do with it. Your bottom is not Auschwitz. Let that be clear. But the principle is the same. Something was taken from you. Maybe a relationship, a business, a version of yourself you worked years to build. Maybe you lost someone, or something, or your own belief that things would be different. And now you are here, in the dark, wondering if any of it was worth it. Here is what Frankl understood, that most men never learn. The fall is not the end of the story. The fall is where the story actually begins, because until you hit the real bottom, you don't know what you're made of. You have a theory. He had proof. Now it's time to find yours. There are two types of men who hit rock bottom. The first type breaks. He looks at what was taken from him and lets it define him. He becomes the story of his loss. He wears it. He tells it. He stays in it. The second type does what Frankl did. He looks at what remains and he builds from there. Not because it's easy, not because the pain isn't real, but because he understands that the only person who can give his suffering meaning is him. The pivot is never the moment you expect. It doesn't come when you're ready. It doesn't come when you're strong. It comes when you're on your knees, when the noise finally stops, when there is nothing left to lose. That is the moment. That is when the man you were makes room for the man you're about to become. Don't miss it. And then something shifts. It always does. For the man who chooses meaning, the world comes back. Not the same world. Never the same world. A better one. Cleaner. Sharper. More real. The streets look different when you've been in the dark. The faces of strangers carry weight they never had before. A cup of coffee in the morning sun. A conversation that lasts too long. Music that hits you in a place you forgot existed. This is what survival gives you. Not just a second chance, a second sight. You see what others walk past. You feel what others are too comfortable to notice. You know, in a way that cannot be taught, that all of this is the gift. Not the fall, not the darkness, the return. The return is the gift. You didn't come this far to stay in the dark. Frankl walked out of Auschwitz and wrote a book that changed millions of lives. He didn't recover, he transformed. That is what the bottom does to the men who refuse to stay there. It doesn't just rebuild them, it remakes them. Remember that man on the train, 1942, everything gone, nothing left but one thing, the choice. You have more than he had. You have a roof, you have time, you have the knowledge of what is possible. You have the story of a man who proved it in the worst conditions in human history. So what is your excuse? Don't fear the bottom. The bottom is where men like Frankl were made. And if you are standing there right now, then you are exactly where you need to be.